At a time when the term fake news has been making rounds in the media, it's important to know what it is, how it spreads, and how consumers can avoid falling victim to false reporting. Radio host Brandon Hollingsworth produces both Morning Edition and All Things Considered, two news programs on National Public Radio's Knoxville affiliate.
I'm basically doing journalism, interviews, feature stories, some web reporting on issues of substance to people in East Tennessee. My experience goes back to 2005 when I was in community college, but I started in public radio in 2006.
Hollingsworth offered a unique perspective on the subject based on his years in the field, and first warned audiences to be careful about what we deem to be fake news. As it turns out, according to Hollingsworth, it is vitally important to first distinguish between innocent mistakes in reporting and utterly false information with no factual basis whatsoever.
So the term fake news, it's interesting, came up in common circulation last year, really for the first time. The idea of falsified stories, stories that have not been vetted, stories that were even invented out of whole cloth, is not new, but the term fake news is very, very recent. In fact, I've even seen some commentators already declare that the term fake news is dead. So as we're defining it, fake news would then be false stories, stories that have no basis whatsoever, are not actual journalism, but are speculation masked as reporting.
I asked Hollingsworth what he thought contributed to the proliferation of misinformation. As it turns out, the answer to that question may be more complicated than it first seems.
So the idea here about why this would be spreading so quickly is it's just easy. You know, for people who don't want to take the time to research it and who want that adrenaline rush of hitting send and saying, aha, I'm right, my philosophy prevails. You know, yeah, why take the risk of looking something up because you might be wrong about something. You know, I mean, but it happens. I mean, but that is life. I'm wrong 60 times a day, most before breakfast. You know, I mean, you have to accept in your life that you're going to be wrong about something or that you may not have all the facts.
That led me to wonder about why false reporting seems to draw consumers in so easily. What does it say about the people who share it with others and those who stake ideological arguments on provable falsehoods? Are they bad people or are they just misinformed?
The desire to feel right. I don't think anybody enjoys feeling wrong, right? But sometimes we have to live with that in our lives. You cannot be right 100% of the time, but I think there's a desire, and the media environment is created to such an extent today where you can simulate that. But it seems like that idea of our own fallibility is kind of falling by the wayside too, and now we're always going to be in control of the facts. We can just make up whatever we want, and my truth is the truth. And so I think it's very tempting. It's like getting a high from something. It's like a narcotic, and perhaps like a narcotic, it becomes addictive.
Hollingsworth makes an interesting point. For many of us, it is much easier to see what we want to see rather than taking that extra step to validate the information provided by our news sources. So, are consumers at fault for using fake news as a tool to reinforce our views, or are reporters the ones who are at fault for producing it in the first place?
To have a concerted effort, a multi-level effort among civilians, political leaders, people in certain internet circles, actively engage in a campaign to discredit actual reporting, this sort of amazing anti-intellectual bent to discredit everything that might undermine their point is disconcerting, and it should be to all of us.
Most people accept that journalists in all fields have a professional responsibility to report accurately. Even Hollingsworth noted at one point that although he sometimes makes mistakes during newscasts, he often receives calls from his listeners with the correct information, which he does appreciate. What does it say about journalists who report it on purpose? Are they lazy, malicious, misinformed themselves, or are they simply under too much pressure to produce content by nature of their profession?
It's about a group of people who have decided to reinvent reality in their own image. Again, regardless of what the facts may indicate, they will just create a narrative.
From our interview, it became clear that fake news is a multifaceted issue with no single cause. Regardless, Hollingsworth felt that those who produce it and present it as fact should be held accountable.
I'm not at all fond of the idea that we kind of pretend we're above, our own responsibility or culpability. And if I'm the one that's, saying protesters were paid to be at the state capitol building, and it turns out that's not true, then yeah, I'm at fault for saying that. Without checking it, without, looking into it, I think that's crucial. But that, again, I think would apply mostly to journalists who care whether they're right or wrong. the people that we're talking about, these purveyors and creators of so-called fake news or falsified stories, may not care that they're wrong. Or people, and I hope there are quite a few of us that work in media that do care whether or not we get it right. Yes, absolutely, responsibility should be expected, accountability should be expected, and you can't be afraid to be questioned about these kinds of things.